My name is Mallory Keene, and I was 36 years old when my parents sold the only home that had ever felt like mine while I was 3,000 miles away, teaching wounded veterans how to walk again. I was in Phoenix, standing beside a parallel bar in a rehabilitation room that smelled of antiseptic, rubber mats, and burnt coffee, when my phone buzzed in the pocket of my scrubs. I almost ignored it. Naomi Park, my grandmother's old neighbor in Maple Hollow, never texted unless the weather had taken down a branch or the mail had piled up on the porch. But something made me look. The photo loaded slowly. First the gray-blue siding, then the white trim around the windows, then the crooked stone path my grandmother June used to sweep every morning before breakfast. And finally, planted in the front yard where her tulips used to come up every April, a red sign with one word across it. Sold. Not for sale. Not pending. Sold. I stood there, with my thumb frozen on the screen, while a veteran named Mr. Callahan asked me if we were doing another lap. I told him yes, because my body knew how to keep working, even when my mind had stopped. 3 hours later, my father called. His voice was calm, almost bored, like he was explaining a late utility bill. "You weren't using the place, Mallory," he said. "That house saved this family. Don't turn it into a tragedy." I remember looking through the hospital window at the Arizona sun, bleaching the parking lot white, and for 1 second, I wanted to scream so loudly he would feel it all the way in Vermont, but I didn't. I ended the call, opened my email, found Miriam Voss, my grandmother's attorney, and typed one sentence. "I think my mother just did what Grandma June was afraid she would do." Before we begin, please subscribe to support the channel and help stories like this reach more people. Is your heart feeling a little down today? If so, leave a 1. If you're feeling okay, leave a 2. Whatever your answer, I hope this story brings you a little warmth and peace. Let's begin. Miriam Voss called me back 17 minutes later. She did not start with comfort, and I was grateful for that. Some people hear panic in your voice and hand you soft words when what you need is a map. Miriam asked where I was, whether I had signed anything in the past 6 months, whether I had given anyone legal authority over the house, and whether my parents had access to it. I answered from an empty supply closet, with my back pressed against a shelf of clean towels. When I told her my mother had a spare key, and my father knew the alarm code, Miriam went quiet. Not shocked, quiet. Confirming quiet. The kind of silence that told me someone else had imagined this possibility long before I had. "Do not call them again," she said. "Do not accuse anyone. Come home as soon as you can." My supervisor heard the word forgery and approved emergency leave before I finished explaining. By Friday night, I was back in Vermont, wearing the same jacket I had packed for Phoenix mornings and carrying a folder Miriam had handed me with both hands, as if paper could weigh more than wood. 3 days after Naomi's photo, I sat at my parents' dining table under the brass chandelier my mother polished every Easter. It was the same table where I had eaten birthday cake as a child, the same table where Austin had announced every new business idea like the rest of us were investors waiting to applaud. That night, no one applauded. My mother, Lorna, had been crying before I arrived. I could tell because she had used too much powder beneath her eyes, and because she kept whispering that she was sorry without ever saying what she was sorry for. My father stood near the kitchen doorway, with his arms folded, looking past me instead of at me. Austin sat closest to the hall, bouncing one knee so hard the silverware trembled. Between us sat the navy blue folder. It looked too ordinary for something that had taken all the air out of the room. No lock, no ribbon, no dramatic label, just smooth cardboard, clean corners, and the kind of silence my family had never known what to do with. Miriam had not explained everything yet. She had only told me enough to understand why my father's voice changed when I said the word lawyer. Austin broke first. "Mal," he said, and there was no charm left in him. "Can you just tell them this was a misunderstanding?" My father finally looked at the folder. Not at me, at the folder. That was when I understood. They were not afraid of losing my forgiveness. They were afraid of what was inside. I placed my palm flat on the cover and said, I'm not here to hear why you did it, I'm here to hear who signed my name. Before anyone at that table answered me, before my mother found her tears again, or my father decided which version of the truth might still save him, my mind went somewhere else. It went back 9 years, to the small room at the back of the Maple Hollow house, where my grandmother June kept her sewing machine under a cotton cover and her measuring tapes looped over a brass hook like yellow vines. I was 27 then, still working long shifts at the VA clinic in Burlington, still telling myself exhaustion was proof of usefulness. Every Saturday, I drove 40 minutes to her house with groceries in the passenger seat and a toolbox in the trunk, because Grandma June had reached the age, especially after her hip surgery, where she could still see everything that needed fixing, but could no longer climb a step stool without making my heart stop. That winter evening, snow had sealed the windows white. The old radiator clicked under the sill, and the room smelled like pressed linen, machine oil, and the peppermint tea she never finished. I was standing on a chair, replacing the bulb above her cutting table, while she sat beneath me with a half-hemmed wedding dress spread across her knees. Even at 72, her stitches were so neat they looked less sewn than decided. She tugged one white thread loose, squinted at it, and said, "People tell you who they are when they think you are too kind to notice." I laughed because I thought she was talking about one of her brides, maybe a mother-in-law who wanted sleeves added for free or a cousin who had not paid her bill. Grandma June did not laugh with me. She folded the dress carefully, set it aside, and opened the narrow drawer of her sewing table. From inside, she took out a pair of silver scissors, old enough that the handles had worn smooth where her fingers rested. She placed them in my palm and closed my hand around them, the way you close a child's hand around something breakable. "If one day Lorna tells you this house should have been hers," she said, "do not argue with her." I looked at her then. Really looked. The porch light caught her face through the window, and for the first time I noticed how tired her eyes were. "Grandma, why would she say that?" June reached over and touched the back of my hand. Her skin was thin, but her voice was not. "Because wanting a thing long enough can make some people believe they earned it." I remember the bulb flickering on above us. I remember the pale circle of light spreading across the fabric, across her hands, across the scissors in mine. Then she said the sentence I carried for years without understanding it. "The person with the loudest claim is not always the owner, Mallory. Sometimes the owner is simply the one holding the papers." For years, I thought Grandma June said that because she was old enough to understand property better than feelings. I did not realize she was describing the exact shape of my family. In our house, need was not measured by what hurt. It was measured by who made the most noise. Austin was good at noise. He could turn a parking ticket into a family crisis, a late credit card payment into proof that no one believed in him, a bad month at work into a reason my mother should cook his favorite dinner, and my father should quietly transfer money he never mentioned again. By the time he was 25, my parents had rescued him so many times they had started calling rescue support. When Austin wanted to open his first barbecue truck, my father co-signed the loan, and my mother told everyone at church her son had an entrepreneurial spirit. When the truck failed 8 months later, nobody used the word failed. In my family, Austin never failed. He pivoted, reset, regrouped, or learned. They said the location was wrong, the city fees were unfair, people did not appreciate real smoked brisket anymore. When he opened a small restaurant in Burlington and burned through the deposit, the inventory account, and 2 employees who finally quit after missed payroll and broken promises, my mother still said he was learning. She always said Austin was learning. I was expected to arrive already taught. I learned early not to ask. I bought my own used car, with a check that made my hands shake. I worked weekends in college. I picked up holiday shifts because someone had to. When my apartment flooded my first winter after graduation, I slept on a friend's couch for 6 nights and told my mother after the carpet was already replaced. She said, "See? That's why I never worry about you." It sounded like praise if you did not listen too closely. Lorna loved telling people I was strong. She said it at family dinners, in grocery aisles, after church when older women asked how her daughter was doing. Mallory is so independent, she would say, touching her pearl necklace like she had personally raised me into sturdiness. She never needs anything. What she meant was that asking from me cost nothing, because I had trained everyone to believe I would never send them a bill. Patrick did the same thing, only with fewer words. If Austin called during dinner, Dad answered. If I called, he let it ring and texted later. Everything okay? Because with me, he expected the answer to be yes. I had built that reputation board by board, shift by shift, apology by swallowed apology. I was the easy daughter, the useful one, the one who would understand, and once a family decides you will always understand, they stop asking what they are allowed to take. The first time I understood the house had become a number in their heads was not when I saw the sold sign. It was a month before Phoenix, in the parish hall of Street, Agnes, under fluorescent lights and paper banners that said, "Community begins with care." My mother had asked me to come help with the church fundraiser because, in her words, people like seeing the whole family together. What she meant was that she liked being seen with the version of us she could arrange neatly. Patrick carrying folding chairs, Austin shaking hands like a man with plans, me refilling lemonade pitchers in a navy sweater, quiet and useful. The room smelled like coffee urns, baked ziti, and lemon floor cleaner. Women from the church moved between tables with clipboards, collecting donations for winter heating assistance. My mother floated among them in a cream cardigan and a small gold cross, accepting compliments like she had earned them by suffering beautifully. "Lorna, you do so much," someone said. She lowered her eyes and smiled. "You just do what family needs," she answered. I remember the sentence because of how easily it came out of her mouth, like a key she had practiced turning. I was carrying a tray of plastic cups toward the kitchen when I heard her voice near the coat rack. She was speaking to Maribel Sloane, a notary who sang alto in the choir and always wore lipstick too bright for her face. My mother's tone had gone soft and private. "Sometimes family paperwork has to move faster than people do," Lorna said. "Mallory trusts me. She's away so much, and honestly, she hates dealing with forms." Maribel made a small, uncertain sound. "As long as everything is signed properly." My mother laughed under her breath. "In families like ours, signatures just catch up to what everyone already understands." I stopped behind a stack of donated canned goods, tray balanced against my hip. The words did not mean enough yet to accuse anyone, but they meant enough to stay with me. My mother came around the corner and saw me. For half a second, something tightened in her face. Then she smiled. "There you are. Austin wanted to talk to you." He found me in the hallway outside the Sunday school rooms, where children's drawings of Noah's Ark curled on the walls. He smelled like wood smoke and drugstore cologne, and his charm was already working too hard. "Hypothetically," he said, "if Grandma's house could help the family breathe a little, you wouldn't just let it sit there, right?" I looked at him. "It's not sitting there. I take care of it." He sighed, disappointed in me, before I had even refused. "You always make things about rules." Not rules, I thought. Boundaries. I thought about Grandma June's silver scissors, about the bright church hall behind us, about my mother saying signatures could catch up later. I just had not learned yet that boundaries were the only thing standing between my family and my front door. Grandma June had died the October before all of this, on a Thursday morning so clear it felt almost insulting. The nurse said her heart had simply gotten tired, which sounded gentle until I stood in the doorway of her bedroom and saw how still the room had become without her in it. The curtains were open. A square of pale Vermont sun lay across the quilt she had patched twice and refused to replace. Her reading glasses sat on the nightstand beside a glass of water, and for one strange second I thought if I touched her shoulder, she would wake up and ask why everyone was whispering in her house. The service was simple, but the church was full. That was the thing about women like June Whittaker. They did not make much noise while they were alive, so people only realized how much space they had held when they were gone. Half the town had a dress she had altered, a curtain she had hemmed, a child she had watched for an afternoon without charging, a casserole dish she had returned cleaner than it came. Women I did not know squeezed my hand and told me she had been proud of me. I nodded because I could not trust my voice. My mother cried the loudest. Lorna sat in the front pew with a folded tissue pressed to her mouth, shoulders trembling just enough for people to notice. During the hymn, she leaned against Patrick like grief had made her fragile. I wanted to believe it was real. Some of it probably was. That was the hardest part about my mother. Her feelings were not fake. They were just never allowed to be smaller than anyone else's. After the burial, people came back to the Maple Hollow house with covered dishes and soft voices. Coats were piled on Grandma June's bed. Someone had left a coffee ring on the porch rail. In the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed too loudly, the way ordinary things do after a death. By late afternoon, the casseroles were half gone, and the crowd had thinned to family. I found my mother in the sewing room, standing beside the old covered machine with one hand resting on it like she was claiming a witness. She kept everything exactly the same, Lorna said. I waited in the doorway. Then she turned, and the fragile softness she had worn all day was gone. She should have left this to me. Patrick heard it from the hallway. Austin heard it from the stairs. Neither of them corrected her. A week later, Miriam Voss read the estate documents in her office. The house, she said, would remain protected under the Whitaker Home Trust, with me as beneficiary and successor trustee. I remember gripping the arms of the chair, not because I was surprised Grandma June had protected me, but because I finally understood she had believed she needed to. My mother smiled in a way that barely moved her mouth. Of course, she said. Mallory did spend the most time with her, but in the parking lot, Austin caught my sleeve and said, "You know Mom's hurting, right?" That was how it started. Not with a demand, but with concern sharpened into guilt. That guilt worked on me for months in small, ordinary ways. It showed up in Lorna's sighs when I mentioned repairs, in Patrick's silence when Austin's restaurant came up, in the way family conversations bent toward the house and then pretended they had not. By the time I stood in that supply closet in Phoenix with Miriam Voss on the phone, I was not asking whether my parents had crossed a line. I was asking how far past it they had already gone. Did they have any right to sell it? I asked. Miriam did not answer immediately. I could hear paper moving on her end, the soft scrape of a drawer, then the click of something being set on a desk. "Mallory," she said, "your grandmother left something for you." The fluorescent light above me buzzed. Outside the closet door, someone laughed at the nurse's station, and a cart rolled past, with one bad wheel tapping the floor. The world kept doing normal things while mine waited for one sentence. What kind of something? A folder. Navy blue. June gave it to me 2 years before she died. She said I was not to open it unless Lorna tried to interfere with the house. I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because a part of me had known this was coming and had still hoped to be wrong. Miriam read enough over the phone for me to understand the shape of it. The Maple Hollow house was protected under the Whitaker Home Trust. No sale could happen without my direct signature, witnessed in person by an independent attorney. Any old power of attorney connected to the property had been revoked and filed. The house also carried a preservation restriction with the town because of its age and original craftsmanship, which meant no buyer could gut it without review. And beneath all of that was the clause Grandma June had built like a locked door. Anyone who attempted to transfer or profit from the house by fraud would forfeit any remaining interest in her estate. Then Miriam's voice changed. "There is a letter." I sat down on an overturned linen bin because my knees had gone weak. She did not read the whole thing, only the first lines. "Mallory, if you are hearing this, then your mother has chosen the house over telling the truth. Do not hate her for being exactly who she is, but do not become smaller, so she can keep pretending." For the first time since Naomi's photo, I cried. Quietly, angrily, not because the folder existed, but because Grandma June had loved me enough to prepare for a betrayal I had spent my whole life refusing to name. When Miriam finished, I wiped my face with the sleeve of my scrubs and said, "Tell me what I need to do next." Miriam gave me instructions so plain they steadied me. "Do not call my parents. Do not threaten them. Do not post anything online. Save every message, forward every voicemail, and let anyone who lied keep talking. People who believe they are entitled, she said, usually explain themselves before they realize they are confessing. I wrote that sentence on the back of a patient discharge form and folded it into my pocket like a prescription. By noon the next day, my mother started calling. The first voicemail was soft. Mallory, sweetheart, I know you are upset. Nobody wanted you to find out this way. Not nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted me to find out, even then. She was careful with blame. The second message came 20 minutes later, tighter around the edges. You need to understand the pressure your father has been under. This family has carried a lot, and you have not been here to see it. By evening, she had found her favorite weapon. Your grandmother would be ashamed to see you turning on your own blood over a house. I saved all three. Patrick waited until the next morning. His text had no greeting. We need to settle this before lawyers make it worse. I stared at those words, while a veteran practiced shifting weight onto a new prosthetic leg 10 feet away from me. Men in that room were relearning balance with more honesty than my father had ever brought to a dinner table. I typed nothing back. Austin lasted until Thursday. Mal, come on. The restaurant is finally getting another shot. If this blows up, I'm done. Then, 6 minutes later, you help strangers every day. Why is helping me so impossible? That one almost got me. Not because it was fair, but because it was familiar. My family had always known exactly where to press, the place where my work, my guilt, and my need to be useful overlapped. I put the phone face down and helped Mr. Callahan take 6 steps without holding the rail. When he finished, he cried. Not loudly, just enough to make the room go quiet. That was what real effort looked like. Not demanding someone else lose a home so you could call yourself rebuilt. On Friday night, my mother sent the invitation that was not an invitation. Come home Sunday. Dinner at 6. We will talk this through like adults. I asked Pastor Glenn and Aunt Rebecca to stop by so no one feels attacked. I read it twice. She was building a room where I would look cruel if I said no, selfish if I said stop, and dramatic if I said fraud. She wanted witnesses, soft lighting, a roast in the oven, and enough family history in the air to make me forget the law. I sent back one word. Okay. Then I forwarded the message to Miriam Voss and packed for Vermont. I landed in Burlington just after midnight with one carry-on, a stiff neck, and the Navy folder inside my backpack instead of my suitcase. I did not trust checked luggage, with the only thing in my life that suddenly made sense. The airport was nearly empty, all waxed floors and tired lights, and outside the glass doors, Vermont hit me with air sharp enough to wake every part of me Phoenix had dried out. I rented the smallest car they had and drove north in the dark, past closed gas stations, black fields, and farmhouses with one porch light burning, like someone had remembered to wait. I did not go to my parents' house. I did not go to a hotel. I drove to Maple Hollow. The house looked smaller at 2 in the morning. That was my first thought, and it hurt more than I expected. The gray-blue siding held the moonlight. The front steps were still uneven on the left, the way Grandma June had always promised she would fix in spring. But there were cardboard boxes stacked on the porch now, not mine, and a new lock shone too brightly on the green door. The brass key in my hand was warm from my palm. I slid it into the lock anyway, because some part of grief is insisting the world must still recognize you. It did not turn. I stood there with my hand on the knob, while the quiet pressed in around me. That was the moment I understood what they had really taken. Not just a house, not even the legal right to enter it. They had taken the place where I had never needed permission and turned me into a stranger on the porch. A soft voice came from the sidewalk. Mallory? Naomi Park was crossing the lawn in a robe and winter boots, her silver hair tucked under a knit hat. She carried a small cookie tin against her chest. I saw the rental pull up, she said. I figured it was you. She did not ask if I was okay. Older women from small towns know better than to ask questions that make people lie. She just handed me the tin. June left this with me years ago. Said if you ever came home and found the door changed, I should give it to you before you did anything brave or foolish. Inside was a spool of white thread, a photograph of Grandma June standing on the porch in 1989, and a note folded once, "Don't let them turn your boundaries into cruelty." I read it under the porch light until the words blurred. Then I sat in the rental car until dawn, the useless key in one hand and my phone in the other. At 6:12, I called Miriam. "File it," I said. By Sunday evening, the notice had already been filed. Miriam had called it a protective step, a quiet mark in the county records that told anyone searching the title that the sale was disputed and the house was no longer clean enough to touch. I liked the quietness of it. My mother had spent her whole life trusting rooms, expressions, witnesses, the soft pressure of people watching. Grandma June had trusted records. That morning, I showered in a highway motel, put on dark jeans and a gray sweater, and slid the navy folder into the passenger seat like someone I had promised not to leave behind. Lorna opened the door at exactly 5:58, dressed for forgiveness. Her hair was pinned back, her gold cross at her throat, her apron spotless, though the house smelled like roast chicken, buttered carrots, and the lemon cake she baked when she wanted people to remember she was a mother before they remembered anything else. "Mallory," she said, too warmly, "I'm glad you came." She reached for me. I let her hug the air beside my shoulder. Pastor Glenn stood near the fireplace with a glass of iced tea, looking uncomfortable in the way good men look when they have been invited into a story halfway through and told it is about peace. Aunt Rebecca sat on the sofa, purse still on her lap, eyes moving between my face and the folder in my hand. Patrick was at the head of the dining table, carving knife beside him like a prop. Austin leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, pretending boredom and failing. Dinner was already served, but no one was eating. My mother guided us to the table, as if seating people correctly might make the truth behave. "We are here," she began, folding her hands, "because this family has been through enough pain, and I refuse to let property destroy what your grandmother built." I almost smiled at that. Not because it was funny, because she could say Grandma June's name and still miss the point entirely. Patrick cleared his throat. "Your mother and I made a hard decision. Maybe the paperwork moved faster than it should have, but the intention was to keep everyone afloat." "Everyone," I said. He looked relieved, as if I had agreed with him. "Exactly." Austin stepped in then, voice low and practiced. "Mel, I'm not proud that I needed help, but I was drowning. You know what that feels like. You help people get back on their feet for a living." There it was. My job turned into a rope around my neck. I looked from him to my mother, then to Patrick, then to Maribel Sloane, who had slipped into the back hallway so quietly I had not noticed her at first. Her face was pale. I set the navy folder on the dining table. The sound was small. Everyone heard it. I opened the folder slowly, because I wanted them to see that nothing inside it was hurried, emotional, or confused. The first page I placed on the table was the Whitaker Home Trust, with Grandma June's name at the top and Miriam Voss's signature at the bottom. "This is the document that owns the Maple Hollow house," I said. "Not me personally, not Mom, not Dad. The trust." Patrick's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. My mother stared at the page as if the paper itself had betrayed her. The second document was the restriction on sale. No transfer, no listing, no agreement involving the property could happen without my direct signature, in person, witnessed by an independent attorney. The third was the revocation of every old power of attorney connected to the property. The fourth was the notice Miriam had filed with the county that morning, freezing the title until a court decided what had happened. My mother's hand went to the cross at her throat. Austin stopped leaning against the counter. Then I laid down the copy of the supposed authorization they had used to sell the house. "That is not my signature," I said. Maribel made a sound so small, it might have been missed if the room had not gone so still. I looked at her, not angrily, just directly, and placed the next pages beside the forged form. My Phoenix work schedule, my badge log, the rehabilitation unit, camera timestamp. and 3 clean samples of my real signature from hospital documents Miriam had requested with my permission. According to this paperwork, I signed in Vermont on a Tuesday morning, I said. According to the hospital, I was in Phoenix helping a patient walk between parallel bars at the same hour. Pastor Glenn set his glass down very carefully. Patrick finally spoke. Mallory, this got complicated. Your mother was trying to... No, I said, and the word came out quieter than I expected. Don't dress it up for me. Maribel began to cry then. Not dramatically, not like my mother. She covered her mouth with one hand and said, Lorna told me you knew. She said you had agreed, but you were too busy to come home. She said it was just helping the paperwork catch up. My mother snapped her head toward her. Maribel, but it was too late. The room had heard it. I opened the last page, Grandma June's forfeiture clause, and pushed it into the center of the table. Anyone who tries to transfer or profit from the house by fraud loses any remaining interest in her estate, I said. Miriam is on standby. The title company has been notified. So has the county. Austin's face went slack. How much are they going to want back? That was the first honest question anyone had asked all night. Lorna reached across the table then, not for the papers, but for my wrist. Her fingers were cold. Mallory, please, she whispered. We are sorry. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We will make it right. I looked at her hand on mine, then at the folder between us. You don't want forgiveness, I said. You want protection from consequences. The consequences did not arrive like thunder. They arrived the way real consequences usually do. One envelope, one phone call, one appointment with an attorney at a time. By Monday morning, the title company had frozen everything. By Wednesday, Tessa Lang, the nurse who had bought the house in good faith, had her own lawyer and a title insurance representative, explaining what no first-time homeowner should ever have to hear. I met her once in Miriam's office. She had tired eyes, a 7-year-old son in the hallway coloring dinosaurs, and a hand that shook when she held her coffee. I told her the only thing I could offer that mattered. You didn't steal my home, I said. My family sold you something they had no right to sell. She cried then, and somehow that hurt more than my mother's tears ever had, because Tessa's were not a performance. The legal part took 18 months. The sale was unwound. Tessa was made whole through insurance and settlement, though I knew no paperwork could give back the version of peace she thought she had bought. Maribel lost her notary commission and her place in the choir before spring. Patrick sold his repair shop to cover part of the restitution. Austin's barbecue restaurant closed quietly on a rainy Tuesday, with a handwritten sign in the window thanking customers for their support. Lorna stopped sitting on the church finance committee. She told people she was stepping back for health reasons. In Maple Hollow, people were polite enough not to correct her out loud. Grandma June's forfeiture clause held. Whatever my mother and Austin had expected from the remainder of the estate passed out of their reach. Miriam told me the result in her steady lawyer voice, but I heard my grandmother beneath it. Not angry, not triumphant, simply firm. She had not built that clause to punish them. She had built it so I would not have to become cruel to be safe. I moved back into the house at the end of September. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor because most of the rooms were still bare. Before bed, I walked through each doorway and touched the frames like I was introducing myself again. The sewing room smelled of dust and old wood. I cleaned the covered machine, hung the silver scissors above the work table, and opened the windows until the whole room breathed. Months later, I began teaching Saturday sewing classes there, for women starting over after divorce, debt, grief, or simply too many years of being useful to everyone but themselves. My mother sent 3 letters, my father sent none. I read hers, folded them neatly, and put them away unanswered. I did not lose my family over a house. I found out they were willing to lose me for one. And for the first time in my life, I stopped holding open a door for people who had already locked me outside. The lesson I carried out of all of this was not that family can betray you, Most of us learn that in smaller ways long before anything dramatic happens. We learn it in the phone calls that only come when someone needs money, in the apologies that never name the harm, in the way some relatives call you strong when what they really mean is convenient. The deeper lesson was this: love does not require you to surrender your boundaries to prove your heart is good. For years, I believed being the dependable one meant absorbing the cost. I thought peace meant staying quiet, forgiving quickly, letting people explain away what they had done because they were tired, scared, broke, grieving, or family. But there is a kind of kindness that becomes permission. There is a kind of loyalty that teaches people they can hurt you and still expect you to protect them from the consequences. Real love does not ask you to erase yourself. Real family does not need you powerless in order to feel safe. Grandma June understood something I had to learn the hard way. A home is not just walls, windows, and a legal description in county records. A home is the place where your dignity is allowed to stand upright. And when someone tries to take that from you, defending it is not cruelty. It is recovery. Sometimes forgiveness comes later. Sometimes it never comes in the form people demand. But healing begins the moment you stop confusing silence with peace. Mallory did not win because she shouted the loudest. She won because she finally trusted the truth enough to let it speak. She protected the house, but more than that, she protected the part of herself her family had spent years trying to use. If this story reminded you of someone who is always expected to understand, always expected to give, always expected to be fine, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to choose your boundaries over keeping the peace? And if this story stayed with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember this. Being kind does not mean being easy to take from.